long-term goal is really for a certain percentage of the world to be in love with nouns, right? And that they fall in love with nouns on their own. I think it can be initially through this plush vehicle. I think that, the way that it's been done with everything from Hello Kitty and Snoopy and Totoro, while plush in the beginning, I think will be a great connection point to start off that relationship with a growing percentage of people around the world that are not familiar with crypto anything and won't have a wallet, right? But wouldn't it be great that like they fall down the rabbit hole?
Yo, grab your headphones, get ready to roll. ZEROPOD coming at you, taking control. We talking about nouns, NFTs, and Web3. Doing it big, bringing the knowledge for free.
Welcome back to another episode of ZEROPOD, a CC0 video podcast about enjoying Ethereum. I'm Toady Hawk from the Noun Square on-chain media collective. My co-host for today is Joshua Fisher, and we are excited to welcome our guest this week, creator of such iconic character brands as Uglydoll and Bossy Bear, Mr. David Horvath, alongside his wife and partner, Sunmin Kim. Welcome to Zero Rights Reserved podcast, David.
Thanks very much for having me. It's very much a pleasure to be here with both of you, finally.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if we've ever had a face-to-face video. I know you've been on our spaces a number of times, but this might be the first time.
You're right. I didn't even really realize. I mean, the voice is a voice I've known for forever. And then now I can't quite track who I've actually seen in person, semi-person, in face, in cartoon.
That's right. I think I've seen your picture. I think I've seen your picture, obviously, but I don't think I have actually seen you on video. So a nice first tier on ZeroPod. So Nouns is all about people, places, and things, and this is a Nounish podcast. So we usually like to, before we get into the places and the things, we like to dig into the people. So Joshua and I would love to hear, and everyone who's listening back would love to hear a little bit about the David Horvath origin story, if we could. Maybe we could go way back and just start with, what was David like as a kid? Like, were you creative? I want to know, were you creative from a young age? Did you kind of always know that you wanted to take this career path as a creator?
Sure. I did know that I would very much wanted to enter the lifestyle character brand business, but became aware that there is such a thing much later. I knew that I always wanted to use toys as sort of like what I now refer to as a brand storytelling vehicle. But I also knew that I didn't want to work for a toy company, and I had no interest in making, Batman toys for whoever had the license, or Todd McFarlane's Spawn if I had my own toy company. And that was sort of like the first hint at there being a model for such in the 90s.
So what toys did you like? What toys did you like playing with when you were a kid?
My father was in advertising, and so he used to bring back from Japanese clients or trips to Japan. Now I don't quite remember which was the truth, but we had these die-cast metal robots from various series that I guess he just picked up at random toy stores that, of course, were unavailable in the middle of New Jersey, where we were in the middle of nowhere. So this is pre-Star Wars. So my friends had Bionic Man with a hole in the back of the head to look through and roll up his skin to see the electronics, which they thought were awesome. And then they would come over, and we had what now everyone knows as a jumbo. Mattel released it later as Shogun Warriors, and then it wasn't cool. It was like, oh, look at this, it's new. It's like, yeah, I have that. but we had Mazinga and these die-cast metal toys that actually Mattel re-released so many of those later. That happened to me again in the 80s. There was a toy store in Los Angeles called Toys International, and in the back they had a whole case on stuff that they imported from Japan. So I grabbed, not knowing I was grabbing like Macross, what later became Robotech toys. And then about a year later, the show suddenly starts on TV in America, and I was like, I have these. It happened with Voltron. I bought it. I had a Japanese one. It was called Go Lion from Bandai like a year before. And then it happened with Power Rangers. I was at the Japanese mall in Los Angeles, and out of them, there was a toy store in the mall at the time called Pony Toy. And then out of the whole massive visuals of thousands of toys, and I picked out this one dinosaur robot. And then 9 months later, I'm driving down on Santa Monica Boulevard, and there's a giant sign for Power Rangers. The first season's coming soon. It's like, dang it! Every time I think I find something cool, they just bring it to the U.S. and it's no longer a great, So, but then I realized, or am I good at identifying things, right before someone else capitalizes on it?
Nice. So you have like, a nice background of plushies, but is there like how many, toys and action figures and statues do you have around the house? So do you still collect a lot?
It's mostly these, and these are more like this is by a artist and brand. Her name is Ayako, and her brand is called Uamau, Uamau, I think. And she started maybe 15 years ago, really from zero, using very similar pathways and approaches that we have been using. And now, I mean, this plush specifically was made by a company in Japan called Sekiguchi, who's known for like phenomenal, especially Snoopy plush and a lot of like the main major licenses in that lifestyle character brand category. They're responsible for like the best of the best. They're the company that originally released Manchichi back in, I guess the 70s. If you remember what Manchichi was. Everyone can Google Manchichi if you can. If you can.
We'll put it on the screen right here.
But they
the magic of post.
Like, versus what we hear a lot these days in Web3 about releasing a plushie, which is understandable that you might think that that's something you should do, versus what plush actually is, which is a very specific. Actually, plush in like Hello Kitty and all these other brands serve a very specific purpose. They're actually mechanisms to activate something very specific. Even Pokemon, when you walk into the store in Japan or in the middle of New York City, and you see the giant plush always in the front center, you think that they're just trying to make sales on products connected to what you think of when you think of cards and games. But even there, they serve a specific function, remarkably so. So it's understandable that many think, oh, character, and my collection has characters. We need to have some plushies, which great for you. But so Sekiguchi is the other end of that. They understand the purpose of it, and therefore it must be the most incredible thing you've ever held in your hand.
What is that like connection? What do you think it is about plush specifically that creates that type of affinity?
Well, there are SpongeBob stuffed animals at Target, right? And those literally are just stuffed plush. Their function is they meet a certain price point. It's of the softer category that maybe appeals to certain, whoever wants to put a plush doll on their bed based on their favorite show, and then that's the end of it, right? Versus, like Sanrio, half of their, I don't say half because no one knows for sure, but I'll say a large portion of their revenues come from plush, and yet they're not a toy company, and they most certainly don't primarily aim towards selling towards children. So when you're starting from zero, and that's what we found with Uglydoll, that was our theory at least anyway, and we've now, after meeting all these companies and hearing very quietly what the truth of the matter is, that our hunch was mostly correct. That if you have a character and you're starting from absolute zero, and you need to, how do I go from zero to a certain portion of the population, not just knowing about it? And this is what we learned from the masters early on, is that when you're entering the lifestyle character brand business, you're not just, the worst thing you can do is to be caught in pursuit of other people's awareness, like to be caught in pursuit of it, not the act of like raising awareness, which is also what you don't want. Strangely, because in the age of like, the young people today, like they're Mr. Rogers was Gary Vee in a way, like he was the king of, attention economy and all that, right? So it sort of sounds counterintuitive.
I never thought of Mr. Rogers as being part of the attention economy, but I guess I guess he was.
It is true, though.
It's an endearing term for it the way I mean it here. But that, you've had an entire generation raised on iPhone, and the very, which is true, by the way. If my uncle is opening a hardware store down the street and he needs people to know about the grand opening, place a Facebook ad, you hit the demographic around here locally, and hey, it works, right? That's attention. Whereas if you're building something that's not just a collectible that you want people to line up on a shelf, which is fine too, but if you want to build something that then becomes truly meaningful for people, and that's the reason why there's still Snoopy and there's still these other brands after all this time. It's not just because or retro or nostalgia. Nostalgia only goes so far. You can see in Snoopy's weaker moments. I won't get too deep into it, but I always say all brands are fragile, and certainly that was the case for Snoopy a few times. More recently, like in the 2015 era, when the family and the other parent company let go and sold off to Sony and other entities. Um, yeah, brands cannot live on nostalgia alone.
I just want to reset a little bit. But yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that piece we might have missed between David, the creative child, and like how did you end up being this like full-time creative person that's making these amazing character brands? What's the middle piece that we're missing there?
That's an easy 1, 2, 3 step to tell in a minute or less. I went from a child in New York City looking up at giant displays of Hello Kitty and realizing there's a major difference between that and Batman. And that I noticed that even though the little girls in my class had the press button Hello Kitty pencil boxes that flips out and has, but that also the kids who hung around my older babysitter were super into it, and they're not kids; they're big. Why do they do this, right? So that was fascinating to me. So when we started Ugly Doll, we started it as really a lifestyle character brand. And it was important for it to start through plush because we knew that plush, when found in a place that's meaningful for people, serves as a way to kind of bring you over from across the room. And it presents an opportunity to quite literally hold a brand in your hand, which can be very powerful. Like if what you have really connects with people, then that's really powerful, especially if the plush doll then leads your sort of subconscious or eye to some one other thing, maybe a bag or a smaller plush that you hang on your bag or a mug or something that you would find useful in your life. So that back here, quietly, you say, aha, this is not something I'm going to collect like next to my Ninja Turtles on the shelf or Funko Pops and line them up. This is not a collectible. This is something I'm going to bring inwards into my actual life to make part of me. That's how Miffy and Sanrio and Snoopy and these other brands like Moomin thrive and survive that long because they're not a collectible. And you're not collecting them. There are collectors of Hello Kitty stuff. That's true. But these are entities that are just a part of your being at that point, where you're signaling them when you're out on the town and when people come over and they open the cupboard and there's the little mug there, it's just a part of you. And it's, to how do you get to that point where you have literally a relationship? When you see the Snoopy Museum, we realized people say, wow, Snoopy's huge. They even have a museum. It's like, no, Snoopy has a relationship with a large portion of the population. It has to maintain that relationship. So that museum is an investment to try to nurture and maintain and continue to grow a relationship that's already been established. So these cafes and museums are misinterpreted, rightfully so, by a lot of people as, wow, enormous, that's huge. And well, that's a huge investment in the bigger bet to purposefully and by design attempt to live forever. And that's what we were very interested in trying to achieve.
How did you and Sunmin even sort of know how to embark on that, though? Like, you had this character. I don't know if you created it or if Sunmin did, or if it was sort of a collaborative effort, but how did you decide that, like, we're going to try to take this and make it something special?
Well, Ugly Doll was literally born, but we always had the idea that this is something we wanted to do just by identifying, okay, we understand that there's a TV show, Cartoon Network, and then there's the toys come out. And, in the 80s, they used to have negative press about how, oh, these shows are just commercials for toys and whatever the formula was, right? But that was not the case for Hello Kitty and Miffy and these other entities that seem to thrive and to live for a very long time without any media at all. There's some weird attempts at media, but in general, it was not a thing you even collect, like how you can have a collection of British soldiers or something, right? It was that these things were just part of people's existence, and that's interesting. Like, how do we even start doing to do that, right? How do you even get to the point where you would psychologically mean something enough that people would want to do that? So that's what we really focused on. And when we graduated from Parsons together, and then Sunmin had to move back to Korea, and I knew, like, okay, well, she's definitely the one for me, first of all. And then if we're ever going to do this, I can't do this. I had, not a penny to my name. She had to move to another country. My only way to get over there was to go there as an English teacher. But then what I've been reading about that, that doesn't leave a lot of time to create a character empire, especially zero. So I wrote her a letter and I said, all right, I'm gonna figure out how we're gonna somehow do this, right? This plan that we've had, the master plan, I'm gonna figure it out. And I signed it with the little character at the bottom. And then the press gets it wrong. They say, and then she turned it into a doll and sent it back to me. But that's like saying, the Eames chair was just, he needed a place to sit. That would be that. In my view, she took that artwork and translated it. She never sewed anything in her life, and she sent back what later, when I would show like the pickiest designers at Mattel, like as friends, like, hey, check this out, and they're like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever held in my hands, right? So it was Eames chairs of plush dolls, I suppose, and she named it Uglydoll, brilliantly so, and I showed it to a friend of mine, Eric Nakamura, who had just opened at the Giant Robot store, who was the editor and owner of the Giant Robot magazine. And I was just showing him, like, hey, man, look how amazing this is. And he said, yeah, that's cool. Hey, I'll take 20 of those. Does he have a friend, right? So I ran back to Sunmin. Well, I went to the phone. Hey, thank you for sending this. And can you please sew 20 more, 20, which then became, almost 1,000 more over a period of time. Like every time we would drop off 20, 30, 40 ugly dolls at Giant Robot, they'd be gone in like a day. Especially if I drop it off on a Friday, by Sunday, end of the weekend, they're just gone.
Which is kind of crazy. You've talked about this a lot, but that's kind of the inverse of that relationship you're talking about, where people would drop Ninja Turtles and then they'd make the toys about the Ninja Turtle show. But here you are just making these characters that don't even have a show, don't even have really an IP yet. What are people attracted to? Why are they grabbing these?
That was the great fortune that it was that specific place, because it was literally the formula that we had been dreaming about, was that thousands of people across the country loved the Giant Robot magazine for up to 10 years at that point. I think it was like an 8-year-old magazine at that point, and it was tremendously meaningful to a pretty growing, niche but growing number of people. This is when there were still magazines. I used to buy it at the Virgin Megastore in New York, to tell you how long ago this was. And then so people would walk into the Giant Robot store, big fans of the magazine, and say, holy crap, I feel like I'm walking into literally the pages of my favorite thing. And it's, it was a culture. It wasn't just a paper magazine to them. It was like, that was like the first time that there had been first it started as Asian American pop culture. And really they were like the launching vehicle for KAWS and Murakami way before anyone knew to write about them. And really Ugly Doll was found in a place that was already meaningful for people. So when they get in there, they're assigning that excitement and that feeling and that emotion to the things which they discover there. And then watching them on the webcam come in and shop and pick them up, which is what the owner of Giant Robot said, hey, we have a webcam now, so you should go home and check out like how people react to your stuff. So which I did. And he was saying...
And here we are on a webcam talking 20 years later.
But they would come in and they would find us there, and they're associating us with belonging to that Giant Robot feelings, whatever they have, right? And plus they're finding us next to Takashi Murakami watches and a Nara ashtray, and these things already mean something to them. So now they're thinking, oh, well, and then this is lumped into that world. And this is exactly what happened, I realized, when we're found at the MoMA store in New York or at the Loft stores in Japan, that when you get out the house in Japan and you make your way to the train and then to work, you're bombarded with millions of images and thousands of characters by the time you even get to your desk, right? Or to my first meeting usually. And I don't even see them, right? Then my first trip there, I was like, oh my God, but then you really, like, your subconscious protects you from it. Otherwise you just can't get through your day, right? So I wouldn't see any of it, I realized. But we found out that it's not just Giant Robot, that there are many places that are, considered as like my stomping ground, or this place gets me, or some special. It could be like, my uncle loves the comic book store in town, just down the corner, right? Down around the corner. So we realized, instead of shipping Ugly Doll plush to toy stores, or where would we even put them? Like, let's put them in places that we believe are meaningful for people, that are already meaningful, that in hopes that meaning would then be assigned to us as we are discovered there, right? And then give them eventually a place then for the eye to go to realize, oh, I'm not going to collect each one and line them up. That I want to draw this thing inwards into my everyday, and that became right away. Like, Giant Robot was the best place to launch this thing, because it was so clear that it was working that way, as we had, knock on wood, been hoping that it would work that way. So that's the story. That's what led me to all you guys.
That's really cool. At what point were you able to reunite? Did you end up going to Korea, or did she come back to North America?
Oh yeah. So they worked so well. I mean, every time we try, like, well, what about, okay, Giant Robots? We found another similar type store in New York City that was a huge favorite of people who are into, like, design books and design in general, that had very little to do with characters or pop culture. And then they flew off the shelves there too. So we thought, okay. So we transitioned from porcelain men making them by hand and ruining our fingers to, we found a factory in Korea that could replicate it really just perfectly, exactly one for one for how she did them by hand. And so we took those to the toy fair the following. I was with that event I just told you about was in 2002. So February 2003, we had them at a little tiny, held it together with duct tape booth at a toy fair in New York City at the Javits Center, and we were bombarded by buyers from shops that were like little funky shops in New York City and in Los Angeles and just across the country. And in the beginning, we just focused on the ones that we felt we could determine were indeed going to be places that would be meaningful for people. Like, right away, we got into the MoMA MoMA store in the museum in Midtown, but also down in Soho, which led to getting into the MoMA store on Omotesando in Tokyo, up on the second floor, still there. And that was a no-brainer. But on the other hand, there are little shops in the middle of small towns that, to that town, is like a place that holds meaning for them, right? So would that formula work for us, and not just in obvious places like museum stores, but also in little out of the way mom and pop shops, more local. And fortunately, it seemed to work there too.
During that first phase, were you guys like just calling these places and identifying them based on your relationships and your knowledge of the industry and friendship circles, and just kind of like identifying the most interesting places and just trying to get your product in there? Or?
In the very beginning, I really just went up and down Manhattan, just like from Avenue A all the way to 92nd and Madison, just, brutal. And then, I walked into, like, somewhere no-brainers. Like, I grew up between New York and LA, so, like, Forbidden Planet, the comic book shop, had been my favorite. Well, now it was on 14th and Broadway at the time. It was on 13th and Broadway for years before that, whatever. But
What was your pitch? Would you put them in there like on a commission basis, or like how did you convince people to
I
carry
just
them?
walked in holding them, and usually that was enough. I would, like, Forbidden Planet, I was like, hey, I grew up here, and it would be a dream to now be able to sell, this stuff that my wife and I came up with, since I was so motivated, like literally inspired and motivated by what was going on there. Because it was not just comics. It was talk about culture and being able to become a culture touch point through just being a retail store. To me, that was one of the earliest memories of that occurring. Like, that was going to church for a lot of people, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious. So, Ugly Doll, you're off to the races. Things are happening kind of the way that you imagined it. Your dream scenario, you get into the, giant robot store and are able to grow this. So what differences do you think you've seen through BossyBear, and like, did you learn things within the BossyBear, rise that colored your expectations of what you're thinking about now for Nouns?
Sure. So I realized and recognized through Snoopy and Miffy and Moomin, those three properties specifically, and then later, more recently, it's true even for Totoro and some others. But Snoopy started as something entirely different, right? It started as, as you know, comics in the newspaper for decades, and then it was the Christmas special in the '70s and Great Pumpkin or '60s even. And then for the kids in the '70s, it was like a metal lunchbox and a Snoopy snow cone machine, right? And then in the more quiet years, it might have been for some just nothing more than like the MetLife Association or the Macy's Association. You go to an old Macy's and there's always Snoopy plush, and they got the parade float. So I guess it depends where it started for you, but that they were able to kind of grow out of the place of that they were born and become something truly much greater, I suppose. Not greater as in better, but just the appeal that they have now and what they do now is absolutely incredible. And it's quite specifically, they are a competitor for Sanrio and all those similar lifestyle brands. Miffy, same thing. It was, I mean, Dick Bruna is a brilliant designer and creator, and it started as something for very young children. And if you go to, go on Miffy's home turf, I can't even pronounce the actual name. It's not Miffy, right? But it's still like it's at the airport. It's clearly like for small kids, maybe specifically there, but that's like 1% of what is happening with Miffy. If you go to where the actual audience is, it's definitely another competitor to Sanrio and it's very much of that world where it's very much for the same adult audience, and then it has that they have this awareness where they're able to use retail in certain countries to then have impact on surrounding territories, which on our first trip to Japan in 2003 or 4, I think it was, we picked up on right away. Like, this is not just because a friend of mine was saying, you're never going to get into Japan. It's all characters, and Japan is like, it's so crowded. Trust me, I got guys here who have licenses which are mega powerful, unlimited funds. Couldn't do it. Like, there's no way in. All right, even if you know somebody, doesn't matter. It's just saturated, right? It's a different culture, right? So not only was that not true, we immediately saw Japan as being the greatest white space of all time if you want to enter the character universe, not just to reach the locals, but in regards to the potential to have impact in all, like from South Korea and uh, Taiwan all the way to reaching back to the U.S. I mean, we were doing projects early on in Japan that we did them literally for the few who knew about us in the U.S. So
You also touched on that earlier, David, when you mentioned that like in Japan, character brands are for everybody too. Like Hello Kitty's for, and it's not just for kids. It's people make it their identity even as adults sometimes.
oh well, I would say Hello Kitty has never been for children, but it goes through weird. Like right now, you can go to Walmart here in the States and you can buy the Care Bears Hello Kitty plush, and it's brilliant, and it's most certainly aged down, and that's right who it's for. But like there are, you go to the Hallmark store. I'm sure there's kids who buy Snoopy plush there for sure, but the lifestyle character brand customer is from maybe university age to top of the bell curve, and then trailing out at like 60s or even into their 70s. Mostly women. Not not so many kids, right? It's like Pokemon. How we still think Pokemon about we think about games and cards, but that's I don't even know what's publicly available now. But even the last time we got a glimpse of what percentage their actual business was games and cards, and it's most certainly shrunken even more since then. It was getting pretty small.
Oh wow! So what is the bigger percentage?
When I think of Pokemon, I mean, when you say Pokemon to me, my just back here is thinking about ceramics and oven mitts and bags that you would bring to you go to a picnic or something, or slippers, or things that you could use in your daily life, like things that you just have that you just use. Like how the New York Times used to say, "Oh, there's Hello Kitty toilet paper and toasters," and that's because those things are things that you use in your everyday, and that's the power of a lifestyle character brand business. But the trick is getting people to actually care versus know about something. That's very much the magic formula, and Sanrio will never put that in a press release. But it truly is what separates being just an IP or something that's on television, which is great. That's wonderful. Has nothing to do with the lifestyle character brand business at all, and nothing to do with the potential to literally last for generations and thrive in a way where no one's going to drop things that are a part of them, right? Now, like any relationship, you can fall out of love as well. So it's not just about getting that awareness or making that connection, but maintaining and growing it.
So then for Bossy, did you start the same way with Bossy?
We started with children's books from Disney, and then at the same time, we started to make toys that were very much not for children in Hong Kong. And it turns out that that was like our best-selling plastic toy, whereas Ugly Doll was by far our best-selling, plush doll. We didn't make too many other kinds. But out of all the plastic toys that we had produced, and we had produced quite a bit back, especially in the early days, that with Kid Robot and in Japan with our own factories, that was like the clear breakaway. And it was all adults, and it was the Hello Kitty customer, really. And then we were thriving in the places where you would find Snoopy and Miffy and Moomin and these other properties, versus if you put Bossy Bear into a children's environment, it wouldn't really, even with the kids book, it wouldn't really make the same connection. So we realized what we're going to do with Bossy Bear is, like, which we haven't even gotten there yet. Bossy Bear will be a lifestyle character brand, but first we have to craft its past. That we need that past that Snoopy draws upon, for example, so well. That's a major component of actually when you have a lifestyle character brand. If you can draw upon things that are in your past, which is very different from a nostalgia purchase, but to actually able to reference your history is a very, very powerful mechanism and tool. So we've been just spending 20 years building that part of it so that we could have that history to draw upon. After seeing how well that the character and Bossy Bear bags and shirts and things that we produced, especially in Korea and surrounding territories, did.
When did that first book launch? What year was that?
2007, I believe, and then the second one was 2008. And
that's
then
that's your overnight sensation. That's what they say, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is a really important point, of like how long it takes to have, that type of cultural impact. Not just a moment where it's like, to your point, David, it's like, it's not like, oh, there's like a great spike in attention. It's actually like a buildup of affinity and a buildup of love that like builds this solid foundation. And then you can like have these spikes, and then it like brings your, baseline up as it goes on. But like that baseline is already built over years of like doing the right things and really careful and interesting exploration. That's really fun.
We have found that it's critical that instead of marketing or broadcasting outwards in this realm, right? Not if you have a hardware store, but for this specific realm that we operate in, that it almost really has to be your potential customer, or we call them tribe members, but that it has to be their idea. Like, they have to find you, they have to fall in love with you, and they have to tell others, right? Especially these days, like I say, we're doom scrolling in real life as much as we are online now, right? And on screens. When someone tells me something, I think if you're genuinely excited about something, rather than look, then you have a different excitement level that we just subconsciously as humans pick up on. It just has to be their idea. And so you have to present the scenarios where you are a vehicle for discovery and then connection, which is what Plush has been great for us for. It can happen with plastic as well, depending on the scenario. It's harder.
Has it been? I was curious. Has it been different for you working with, for example, Nickelodeon and Disney with Bossy Bear as a creator versus Ugly Doll, where maybe you maintained a lot more control over the IP, or has it just been the
reason why there hasn't been a Bossy Bear show sooner is just because we always wanted to maintain control. So it's a collaborative process for sure. But our reason for the Bossy Bear show was quite literally so that there could be one that we would draw upon in the past for reference, versus the goal of the people working on the show is we need to make the best show possible, right? So they have a very different goal in mind, right? They're trying to do the best writing or the best animating or the best marketing or whatever it is, that the collaborative spinning plates. But for us as the creators of the property who are, we have the longer term task of it thriving, decades from now.
It's like for you, the show is in service of the character, but for them, maybe the character is in service of the show. Is that a good way of putting it?
I think they just needed something new on the air to keep the advertising.
It's not that, David. It's not that deep. Toady.
Yeah.
So okay, so you've had obviously these two amazing properties that you've been able to carefully grow, and now you're working on maybe another one with nouns and Nouns Sofubi. Something me and Toady kind of talked about is like, how does the CCO nature of nouns affect some of these decisions? Because I think it's really interesting, and I'm really curious to your thoughts here of like, you're building, like there's so many people building simultaneously parallel paths for what nouns can be and how to use nouns. And yours is like a very unique and special path. And, I know that you have a lot of thoughts around how to do that. So I'm curious of how, living in a CCO environment, how that affects some of those things, or if you think like your vertical can kind of like grow in and of its own, and all these other things just kind of add to the lore, and we tell the story that, there are multiple people who can do anything. Like, I'm curious of your thoughts there.
I think,
David, I thought you just pulled out a Heineken there. I was like, wow, is this kind of podcast?
No,
sparkling water, but
no, it's been a while since I've had a Heineken or anything of the alcohol.
Sorry.
So do you actually just like confirm one of my fears? Because I have this like green bottle as well. I'm like, I wonder if people think I'm drinking during my meeting.
Depending on the resolution, it's like, wow, man.
Yeah. David Horvath gets freaky at 11:30 in the morning.
Yeah. So we thought about it quite deeply, especially after being approached by the retailer where they were working so well. For those who are watching, our original prop was half introduce nouns to our contacts in Hollywood, and the other half was to bring nouns into the formula that we had applied for Uglydoll and Bossy Bear, and then the TV show that we had in Japan, Little Boney. And Little Boney actually served the greatest example because that was very much, it was traditional, and it was something that was put on broadcast and then played, and then there was a licensing program that then relied on a portion of the population recognizing it and drawing upon positive feelings that they have about the show, right? That was not a lifestyle character brand for us. But we were very lucky to go through that process, especially there in Japan, to then be able to clearly see that it's not even the same world at all. So in regards to CC0, we realized the plush for us, which is what did so well at this store loft, at the Ginza location, which is the crazy super, there's no buyers there. There's curators, if I could say, like it's a very.
Is it like a giant robot-esque shop? Like, do you consider them similar but in different countries?
It's like it's a giant robot the size of Target.
Right.
Whereas every section though is carefully curated, and you're so lucky if you even get a test shot in one of the locations, sort of way. It's tough. It's very tough. That store is very meaningful for people. When they're coming in there, they're peeling back whatever protects them from the nonsense outside, and they're paying attention in that context. And we made nouns figures that we produced at our old factory in Japan, where we've been making Sofubi for decades. We added some bags to the prop just because we knew we needed that connection. That's not a collectible. It's in and then we added the plush.
Can you explain what a Sofubi is, maybe just for our viewers, in case there's some that aren't familiar?
Yeah, Sofubi, they used to call it kaiju, mistakenly so, but Sofubi just is short, like Pokemon is pocket monsters. Sofubi is really just soft vinyl figure. Sofubi, like figure. And those factories where they do make all of the bad guy monster figures from Godzilla and Ultraman that have been for sale in these coming out of these factories since the 60s, that process and those materials are so unique and of high quality. And I have the best factories in China and Korea. We own a factory in Korea. There's no way to replicate that plastic. Now, the average person, you'd show them both and say, "You guys are nuts. What's the difference?" But those who know, you go, "Yeah, how did you do this?" So there's that aspect to it, and then there's like the hollowed ground aspect that a lot of the great toys that came out of this formative era in Japan in regards to toys and famous robot properties came from these few factories where our factory that we use was the sample maker. Like, oh, they need some for Toy Fair or they need some blank ones that they paint for the catalogs, right? That they would be, we were making our toys in these sort of like on these hollowed grounds, I guess it would be culturally, right? And then Sofubi became immensely popular when exposed through the Pop Mart shows all across mainland China, which led to the rise of Pop Mart, where they quite literally flipped, Mattel on the stock market for a period, at least anyway. So it sort of meant different things to different pockets of people, each pocket a little larger than the other. And we were, I think, one of the first or the only at the time non Japanese native creators working with this material at these factories, or if not, then from a handful of less than maybe five or so. So just the ability to even stand there and watch the process was a blessing, but to work there and to make these figures was something special, not to us, but to those who were paying attention.
So what happened with this first run of Nounish Plush and Nounish figures? How were they received? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So everything sold out. Like we set up the section Thursday evening, and then the real, everything was available Friday when they opened. And I was worried that like fans of nouns in Japan would, come on down and just take absolutely everything, right? Whereas, because really the goal was to sort of hang out in the corner like the old giant robot vidcam days and watch to see how people reacted to it. Pleasantly surprised to find that most of it seemed to have been absorbed just by their regular customers. And so that was an amazing thing to watch. Everything was gone. It was supposed to be up for like a month. Like those products were there for a month. And then one of everything was under glass, and no one could touch that even after it sold out. So everything sold out. The plush sold the fastest, but I mean, nothing lasted. But they received so many inquiries specifically for the plush after the fact that then they came back to us and said, "Oh, these other things are great, and if you can make more," because they understood as we did. We found out after producing the Nouns Sofubi the delays at the factory just after COVID are just they even a year later they have still not caught up with the backlog. So that we can still make those, but we can't say we're going to get this many on a Thursday here or there, and we need them here as we can with the plush because they're produced in our Ugly Doll factory.
So who were requesting these, and why do you think they were gravitating towards them? Because let's just say that probably I would say the majority of people buying these weren't Nouns fans because Nouns is just fairly young, and so even in Japan where there are a lot of Nouns fans, I doubt these plush are being sold to Nouns fans. So who are they being sold to, and why?
No way to know for sure, but this is a store that we have used to insert plush and the whole chain in general for the last 25 years. Um, the customer there is accustomed to being introduced to brands through plush as that sort of mechanism of discovering something and holding something and hopefully making a connection. It doesn't always work. But that's why plush is such a powerful vehicle because it's that it's like that first impression that you can make on someone and that then they look and then there's some bag or wallet or some other thing that they find useful, right? So I think I'm no way to know for sure, but that's the customer. Like that's who goes in there. Um, every character has sort of like its own area, and then there's always a central plush piece, and then the program, which is made up of ceramics and things that are just useful in one's life. So which we had, and so that must be why there was an overwhelming. I mean, there were many requests for all of it. Um, Klim's glass, the noggles were there, and those were gone as well. But the plush received an overwhelming, interest. Plus, we just had more of those than anything else. Where
And
Sofubi,
so, sorry, based off that experience, now you're excited to do it again, right? So, like, since then you've been getting inquiries about it, and now you have a plan to move forward and build a nouns brand in that similar fashion. So maybe tell us a little bit about that plan and how you anticipate it going, and maybe the best case scenario, and maybe some of the challenges that we should be expecting.
Sure, yeah. And then this answers your question, that part of the excitement is, instead of like the plush is going to work, when we see this sort of reaction, at least to me, I have to believe it, that this will work the same way in the other locations. And if that's true, then we have the opportunity to expand it to all 120 locations. And if that works, I'm very sure that we can attract Village Vanguard and some of these other important retail environments that are meaningful for people. Not only in that territory initially, but then to also expand out. So our plan, well, also, here's the answer to the question. CC0, instead of licensing, we'll do the plush and we'll make people connect with nouns, that connection point that we've had so successfully with Uglydoll. And then the goal is to then open up a little bit of shelf space for other nouns creators to perhaps fill out, whereas before we would have done it in-house or through licensing via CC0. Get the creators who seem to like Klim has the minifigures that would work beautifully in some of these stores. I saw a creator, I don't know if the prop went through or not, but there was a creator from Japan who had beautiful products that are a great match for exactly what I'm talking about. The thing that we found with Uglydoll
Can
is,
we get these
any?
these duck heads on the shelf?
Hey, those are amazing.
we've been very close with Duckhead for about 15 years now, so there's always going to be a way.
This is a Duckhead original as well.
The goal is not just to sell stuff. Like for us, the plush is a way to draw people inwards and to then draw the Uglydoll inwards towards, the way that we did with Uglydoll so successfully. And the reaction that we saw at the store really it's like the best reaction we've had with something plush since we first introduced Uglydoll. So the goal is to expand that into other locations. And then this prop also involves us including the Nouns plush into Uglydoll's existing global network of the same sort of high-end specialty stores, or stores that carry meaning for others, really. And that's well beyond Japan. That's for all the countries where Uglydoll, is currently returning to.
And to be clear, this initial prop kind of covers a lot of your work getting this thing off the ground and some of the materials, and kind of sets this up, and not kind of specifically sets this up for continued growth outside of additional funding. Like from your perspective, you may never need funding from Nouns again unless you want to do something. Maybe there's like some sort of big exterior marketing event or exterior thing that you think is interesting that needs to happen. And I'm thinking in like 10 years there's a Nouns museum, or 20 years, or I don't know, but
well, technically even that should be propelled by this prop, right? So this prop is literally designed to then run on itself and not run on itself by itself, but we would plug it into our system, where the short version of it is we're putting the plush into these retailers while also attending these shows, and purposefully attending and exhibiting with the smallest size they have. A small little card table, something very homemade looking, understated purposefully. So that when we go next year, if it's working, we have a little bit bigger booth. And then the next year we'll have a little bit larger space. And then maybe you can walk into it, and maybe eventually it becomes an environment. But we're showing not just to consumers or what I like to call tribe members, but and our potential audience, but also to the industry as well, to signal that they're seeing growth, which they want to be a part of. Like if they're not in it super early, they also like to say, "Oh, we found you when you had the tiny in the corner." Like that. That's a really big thrill of being able to say that as I, or if you have an independent, if you're an independent. And so taking it through the same journey that we went on with Uglydoll, and it's perfect timing because Uglydoll has been on pause for 2 years for the Hasbro versions to do what they did. And originally they were going to come back in 2022, and then COVID just messed up our plans. So they're coming back at the end of this year. So we're going to the Astra show and doing a lot of the other shows where we can have a separate setup for nouns, either right alongside it, or it doesn't matter if it's across the hall from it or wherever it is. That I would personally be manning the nouns area for all of these critical shows in the beginning, especially because we'll have buyers coming through and people asking, what is this, right? So those, not just the retailers, but specifically like the gift show in Tokyo at the big site is so critical. That's not open to the public, and it's really just how Tokyo is millions of little funky shops. Well, all those funky shop buyers and owners come to this one show, so I have to do that.
How do you answer that question, David, when you have a fan, maybe someone who's been a fan of Uglydoll for years and years, and they come up and they see you standing in front of these Nouns plushies and they ask, like, what's this about, David? Did you make this character? How do you answer that question? I'm curious.
Yeah. So the same way the buyer of Loft was, once they realized that it was not our work, because they've sort of been supporting us, right? Specifically the Sunmin and David entity that they've come to know for decades, right? So they would ask, well, what is this? And I say, oh, well, this is the Nouns plush that's designed by Sunmin, the Uglydoll designer. And it's even made with the Uglydoll fur, and it's even made in the Uglydoll factory. So while they're looking at it, I would right away say, do you know Nouns? They have a sports team, esports team. They set up all over various African countries with cleanup crews, and there's a plan to build schools. They have skate parks all over the world. Did you see the sailboats with the big Nouns glasses in South Korea? And they're just what is that, right? So that was enough for that interaction, and that's really all they needed to hear, and to see our excitement behind it, and the level of our enthusiasm, and know that it's genuine.
I guess if you hear that from someone you trust, it's kind of like going to blow your mind. You're going to think, have I missed this trend? Like where have I missed all these things happening?
That's, for me, one of the greatest things. Like especially recently, when I really took a look at Nouns, when the opportunity was then presented to us to really get them back into these stores and to do this through our global network, really. Nouns is now driven by an actual community, and it's really refreshing. I got to say, we're in the era of the floor price, and what are you going to do to get it up, right? What are you going to get that floor price up? Which is fine. I'm not knocking it, right? It reminds me of Star Wars action figure collectors lined up outside Toys R Us before they opened in the 90s. So it doesn't mean that's the toy industry, but that's like a fun component. But that there's more to the toy industry than that, right? There's such a rabbit hole to fall down. As I was explaining before, I think on another podcast, even with lifestyle character brands, when you buy the item, it sort of, that's the end, right? That's the end of the story. You make a purchase, you've absorbed it. There's not really more than that, unless there's more to buy. Whereas with Nouns, that's sort of the beginning, right? When you find the Nouns plush and you're going to open the tag and what's this? And you take a look. For those who want to look further, there's an entire rabbit hole to fall down into, which is not some message board or some thing you click on with a QR code, but is a giant community of people, and then pockets of people all spread around. And each one of them is centered around this invitation of Nouns to build upon it, right? That just blows my mind still to this day. So I'll have to come up with the short version of explaining that, but maybe I don't have to explain that much. That maybe that connection that you make with a plush is the opportunity to at least just let them do it. That I shouldn't say a thing, right? That it's like, find the plush, make a connection with it. Go like this as you're looking at something that you can bring around with you. And then for those who, click on the URL on the tag and take just one step further, I think that what they're going to find is just going to blow people's minds.
That's awesome. I love that rabbit hole analogy. I think you said, like, it's the best rabbit hole to fall down.
It really is. Whereas, you don't really get that with, like, I love Snoopy, And but there's the website of what else is coming what else is coming out or what they're doing, and it's great. But this is very different, and there's nothing else quite like it. And I think that that's to me the CC0 component as far as the what the strength is. So instead of us filling the shelf, like what usually happens with Uglydoll and with everything else we do is you ship something for the first time, it does well, they reorder. By like the third reorder, they're like, well, do you guys make any other things that this is working for me, and if it's working for me, is there a way to make this area bigger, or do you make like thermoses, or like they're going through like what else does well in their store that we might have our version of that.
Some people had that question actually about this prop, about whether you were planning to do other characters. For example, you've got this really cute cloud right now, but
yeah, for the US especially, where maybe it's more assortment oriented, where retailers like to have an assortment, we could easily add, after we do the cloud with a couple different shirt colors, because we're going to be given like a tiny little corner of space initially. But when we get the call back, who I usually call them first, but when you get that inquiry for the reorder, they're going to ask for an assortment. And so it would be great to do the wizard hat or some other simple shapes that are an easy mental read, where you can still make.
I would love to advocate for the frog, but I do agree that like for mass appeal and for like the most nounishness, it's got to be like the absurd heads, like a cloud or a.
Well, I look for simplicity first, just for executing through the Uglydoll factory and with those materials. We're just aiming for connection at this point, right? Whereas in Japan and Korea, when I go to the Taipei Toy Festival in Taiwan, I'm going to probably focus initially on one, like the cloud, and do a couple, like I could do other versions of, like like the focus on Snoopy rather than Peanuts in the territory where they do by far the best, right? Just now they're starting to introduce Lucy in Japan. I mean, it's been there, but very much like kept off to the side and in the background, right? So that the focus is on that character. Yeah, you'll see like Snoopy is Snoopy front and center, but then there will be the weird Snoopy like in blue sometimes with some plaid ears, and then there will be a blue Charlie Brown to go with it, which will be overly and usually based on the early versions of Charlie Brown, and then that makes sense to sort of warm everybody up to the idea. But if it was out the gate just the lineup that we think of when we growing up with the Christmas special or the Great Pumpkin, it's not quite. It's nowhere near the same formula, right?
Was Charles Schultz aware of that, or was like his estate that took it to that level, or did he know that it was kind of two different things to two different populations when he was alive? Sorry.
Oh, the Schultz. I mean,
yeah, like well, Charles, even when he was alive, did he know, or was it big in Japan at that point, or was it really not yet big in Japan?
I think that it always was to a certain degree, but it was really after the Sony acquisition, where Sony Creative, who's the team who put together our Little Boney show and also this character we did for a J-pop boy band back almost 20 years ago, literally the same team, and they're brilliant. They really embraced it as we're going after Hello Kitty. Like it had always been popular, and the focus was pretty much really on Snoopy with some Woodstock elements, right? But not just putting it into stores as a central figure, but what stores they went to and what, if any, brand, not collaborations, but partnerships that they decided on doing, has just been very specific and purposeful. And they're really responsible for bringing a brand that could maybe have somewhat fallen back to that sort of MetLife Macy's days background, but really making probably Hello Kitty worry a lot more about their position in the hierarchy.
Well, maybe we could end with making Hello Kitty worry, making Sanrio worry. What is the most optimistic outcome of this proposal in like 10 years, do you think, if everything goes really well?
Yeah, so my long-term goal is really for a certain percentage of the world to be in love with nouns, right? And that they fall in love with nouns on their own. Whether I think it can be initially through this plush vehicle. I think that the way that it's been done with everything from Hello Kitty and Snoopy and Totoro. Like Totoro, we think of classic animation movie from 20 years ago, but really Totoro is now a competitor, right there with Miffy and Moomin and Snoopy for that Hello Kitty market share, right? And while Plush in the beginning, I think will be a great connection point to start off that relationship with a growing percentage of people around the world that are not familiar with crypto anything and won't have a wallet, right? But wouldn't it be great that like they fall down the rabbit hole where it doesn't feel like some sort of way to get people in on it, it's not mass adoption. It's just getting a new and increasing number of people to truly bring it into their lives, to draw it inwards, all on their own, and then that rabbit hole they fall down and finding everybody down there, which will only grow in number. And then but I want to be part of the activities that are on every day, or I want to watch the countdown, right? Or I like this community. They're building. Oh, I want to try building something on Nouns. I can do it anyway. Oh, I want to make a prop, like that. All these little things that you can actually participate in. That just, I think, drawing the world towards that naturally, where it's their idea, and they're not even associating it with influencers and floor prices and all. By the way, all of that can continue anyway, right? That's all going to go and grow and thrive on its own as it is. So, I think using this approach, that the world will kind of meet you guys somewhere, in the middle, perhaps, and that's the goal. And then to create shelf space for creators, existing creators and new creators who once they find out, oh, I this is not a license. I can, make a prop to do like the cloisonne pins to go right next to those plush on a shelf somewhere at these places is incredible. And
Yeah, there's something really interesting too about like you don't even have to make it like if you have the wherewithal and the abilities to do it, you're just free to do it. You
That's
can just
right.
make your own thing and then present it to, David Horvath and say, "Hey, I have this beautiful thing. What do you think?" And you can get the feedback of like, "It's beautiful, but it's not up to speed," or "This is great. I have a way to introduce this to the market." And that's maybe the only, I don't know, is there any other brand in the world that can claim that ability?
No, I don't think so. Maybe except Thor. not the Disney version, but like
Right, like some of these like bigger
anyone can build,
tales.
I suppose.
Right.
But
But they won't put you next to the like Marvel Thor in the store.
You're not going to be next to, and that's the wonderful thing about, funny enough, making these things is that it's not about making stuff at all. This is not about finding, because ultimately it will be our network is thousands of stores, right? A lot of museum stores, a lot of stores that are special to people, but technically it's stuff. So some may think like, what are you gonna? Is nouns? I don't want nouns to be just things and more stuff. There's enough stuff in the world, but these are not consumer products alone. For me, that they're quite literally vehicles to build a relationship that goes way beyond. Yes, it's through hopefully high quality and well worth it consumer products.
You said beautiful physical objects on a chat the other day, and I thought that was really, really powerful.
Well, yeah, that's really important also. This is most certainly not making a plushie based on some IP. That I can't stand the idea of such. But this is about establishing a relationship with an increasing number of people around the world. And I actually think that we can actually accomplish that.
What does Sun Min think of nouns?
She loves from the beginning. When we first found it, I think we were all there on inception, right? Like from that first tweet from 4156 to it going live.
Yeah, for those who don't know, if you're listening in, David's like as OG noun as you can possibly get. You had
CCO
actually one of the CC0 pioneer for sure. I wouldn't say Maxi by any means, but CC0 pioneer for sure, because you introduced Uma no copyright in the summer of 2021. Several months before nouns, and so you've definitely been here since before nouns was even nouns.
That's true. But I do remember now 3 years ago, our son having the best time with just the playground, right? And that's how Sunmin first found out about it. And then I explained to her, you know, that I mean the model works. You have a great movie, and then you're excited about it, and you go out there and you find some toys, and it kind of like you associate with it, or the world where we came from. Um, those worlds are very much still alive, especially like the lifestyle character brand business is not some old legacy system. In fact, it's thriving now almost more than ever, and we even see that being a real wave. Like the public. At least what's publicly available, the major toy companies are releasing, or they're putting out press releases that for the first time, adults have surpassed preschool as far as buying, like just how many toys are being bought. What?
And I think most of that's actually just Joshua Fisher. So
Yeah,
really,
I'm going to push back there. They are beautiful physical objects, not toys.
They're beautiful, beautiful physical objects. That's very important for it to be so. Yeah, but there is a very real opportunity to start traversing that road now from zero, where you really can. I think there's gonna be a unique opportunity right now, especially in the coming months and over the next year, to actually reach people without them feeling like you've been trying to get them to look at something. I think we know when we're being sold, especially more recently. So beautiful consumer products that draw people, over, and then that they bring into their lives and make a part of their everyday, I think is a winning formula, especially when then coupled with as I say, the magic rabbit hole to fall down.
I love it. David, where can people find out more about what you and your characters and what you're building? Where's the best place to connect with David Horvath?
Sure. For everybody, the easiest is Twitter. Am I at David and then the letter Z and then Horvath, I think. And then I'm more increasingly spending time on the various nouns discords. But the easy, quick find is Twitter or X or whatever it is right now.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today to talk about your illustrious career and the things you've created and what you're hoping to do for Nouns. It's been an awesome convo.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the time.
Yeah,
thank you. David. Appreciate you.
Thank you too, Joshua.
Very good.
We'll see you guys on chain.